My boyfriend's family tried to pull a test on me by pretending to be broke, so I turned the tables and acted like I was penniless, just to see how far they'd go. I'd been dating Adrian for about 8 months when he finally invited me to meet his family for Sunday dinner at their home. He was uncharacteristically nervous on the drive over, which I found kind of endearing. Normally, he carried himself with easy confidence, but that day he kept fiddling with the steering wheel, his knuckles tight. "Just so you know," he said after a pause, "my family's pretty simple. We don't have a lot, but we make do with what we've got." I squeezed his hand and smiled. "That doesn't bother me," I told him, meaning it. What I didn't tell him was that I already knew his family's background. LinkedIn can be a powerful thing. His father, Richard, ran 3 luxury car dealerships across the state. His mother, Diane, sat on the boards of not one but 2 major corporations. His sister, Veronica, was a partner at one of the city's most exclusive law firms. And the address he'd given me was in Meadowbrook, a neighborhood where the average house cost more than $2 million. So imagine my amusement when we pulled up to a small, slightly shabby ranch-style house in an entirely different part of town. The paint was peeling, the grass was overgrown, and there was a beat-up sedan in the driveway. I didn't need anyone to spell it out. I knew exactly what was going on, a test. Adrian parked next to the old car and took a deep breath. "This is it," he said, clearly uneasy. "It's cute," I said cheerfully, playing along. His mother opened the door before we even knocked. She was dressed in worn jeans and a faded sweatshirt, her hair tied back in a simple ponytail. "You must be Sloane," she said warmly, pulling me into a hug that felt rehearsed. Come in, come in. Sorry about the mess." The house was the kind of messy you'd see on a movie set, designed to look middle class. The mismatched furniture looked rented, and the art on the walls was bland and generic. But they'd missed a few details. An Hermes scarf casually draped over a chair. A Montblanc pen on the side table. A pale tan line on Richard's wrist where an expensive watch normally sat. I smiled, complimented the house, and Diane replied with a bright grin. "We've been here for 20 years, she said. "It needs some work, but it's got good bones." Dinner was served on chipped plates with bent forks. I noticed Veronica trying, and failing, not to grimace as she handled the cheap cutlery. Adrian's younger brother, Mitchell, kept glancing at me as if waiting for me to realize I was out of my depth and make an excuse to leave. Richard turned to me partway through the meal. "So, what do you do for work, Sloane?" "I'm between jobs right now," I said truthfully enough. I'd just sold my marketing company for 8 figures and was taking a well-earned break. "Tough economy," Richard said sympathetically. "What field were you in?" "Digital marketing," I replied casually. "A bit of freelance work here and there." Diane jumped in. "Did you go to college?" "I did a couple of years," I said smoothly, "but had to drop out for financial reasons." A complete fabrication, I'd graduated with honors, but I wanted to see just how far this test would go. They exchanged quick, meaningful glances, like they'd confirmed a suspicion. Mitchell leaned forward. "Do you still have student loans?" "Still paying them off," I said with a modest shrug. Diane placed a hand on Adrian's arm, her expression dripping with sympathy. "That must be so stressful," she said sweetly, her tone just this side of patronizing. Throughout the meal, the conversation was sprinkled with subtle, and not so subtle, references to their supposed financial hardships. Richard complained about the cost of car repairs, despite his recent LinkedIn post celebrating the expansion of his dealership empire. Diane talked about clipping coupons and shopping the sales, though I'd seen her wearing a Cartier Love bracelet in a photo on her company's website. Veronica lamented her lingering law school debt, which was laughable considering she'd graduated over 15 years ago and easily cleared 7 figures a year. The performance was coordinated, almost impressive in its dedication. After dinner, Adrian excused himself to help his mom in the kitchen, and Richard gestured for me to join him on the porch. The deck looked purposefully weathered, like it hadn't been refinished in years. He leaned on the railing, expression serious. "Adrian really cares about you," he began. We just want to make sure you care about him for the right reasons. I kept my face neutral. What do you mean? He sighed. He's a good kid with a big heart, but he's been hurt before, by people who were more interested in what he could give them than who he is. I tilted my head. Are you questioning my intentions? Richard nodded gravely. We're not a wealthy family, Sloane. What you see is what you get. If you're with Adrian expecting some sort of financial gain, I'll be honest, that's not something we can offer. I met his eyes steadily. I'm with Adrian because I love him, not because of what's in his bank account. That seemed to satisfy him. He patted my shoulder and went back inside. The second he disappeared, I pulled out my phone and texted my assistant. Pull my investment portfolio. I need documentation showing I'm broke, student loans, credit card debt, the works. Make it look legit. She responded immediately, on it. When I went back inside, Diane caught me near the hallway. Can I have a quick word, dear? She clasped both my hands in hers and smiled gently. You're a sweet girl, Sloane, but I just want to be honest with you. Adrian has big dreams, starting his own business, buying a home, starting a family. That takes stability, and I want to make sure you're both aligned about your future. I understand, I said, keeping my tone humble. I'm doing my best to get back on my feet financially, but it might take a while. Her expression softened into something between pity and concern. And if things get serious, have you thought about how you'd contribute to a household? I'll figure it out, I said lightly. Adrian and I are a team, we'll handle whatever comes. She smiled, though not convincingly, and I knew she didn't believe a word of it. When Adrian and I left later that evening, he apologized on behalf of his family. They just worry, he said, looking genuinely remorseful. Money's always been tight for us, so they get protective. I kissed his cheek. I get it, I told him kindly. Families look out for each other. I asked if he wanted to stay at my place that night. He agreed immediately, and when we pulled up to my small one-bedroom apartment in an average neighborhood, I could see him visibly relax. He had no idea that I also owned a penthouse downtown, and a beach house in Malibu. The apartment was simply part of my cover for situations exactly like this one. Over the next couple of weeks, Adrian's family turned up the volume on their Poor Family act while simultaneously snooping into my background. Mitchell sent me a friend request on social media, and I caught him taking screenshots of my deliberately modest posts, thrift store finds, homemade meals, relatable little money struggles. Veronica invited me out to lunch and spent the entire time complaining about how expensive everything was. The charade was exhausting, but I played my part. I showed up in budget-friendly outfits, drove my decade-old backup car, and dropped casual complaints about rising rent and freelance gigs. They seemed pleased with themselves, convinced their little test was going perfectly. 2 weeks later came Adrian's birthday, and with it, the moment everything unraveled. His family had organized a small celebration at the same rundown ranch house. I arrived with a carefully chosen gift, a rare first-edition copy of a book Adrian had mentioned loving, purchased at auction for $12,000. Before wrapping it, I had it rebound in a simple, worn cover so it looked like something you'd find in a second-hand shop. When I handed it to him, I smiled shyly. Found this at a used bookstore, I said. It reminded me of you. He lit up, clearly touched. His family, on the other hand, looked unimpressed, their eyes flicking from the cheap wrapping paper to the modest-looking book with barely concealed disappointment. After cake and awkward small talk, Diane touched my arm. Sloane, sweetheart, can we talk for a minute? She led me into the kitchen, where Richard and Veronica were waiting. Their faces were serious, the kind of look people wear before delivering bad news. Richard spoke first. We've really come to like you, Sloane, he began, his tone rehearsed. You've made Adrian very happy. Diane nodded solemnly. We can see that he cares deeply about you. Then Veronica, always the direct one, cut in. But we're concerned about the financial dynamic between you two. I tilted my head, pretending confusion. What do you mean? Richard sighed heavily. We've noticed you're struggling a bit financially. That's understandable, everyone falls on hard times. But we're worried about how that might affect Adrian's future. He's worked so hard to get where he is. We don't want to see him held back. Diane added softly, we're not saying you're a bad person. You clearly have a good heart. But sometimes love isn't enough. Practical things matter too. I took a slow breath. Are you suggesting I end things with him? The three of them exchanged glances. Veronica spoke carefully. We're asking you to think about what's best for him. Would it be fair to let him build a future with someone who might be a financial burden? Their words hung in the air, heavy and smug. I stayed calm. I understand your concern, I said evenly. But Adrian and I are adults. We can decide what's best for our relationship ourselves. Richard's jaw tightened. We hoped you'd be reasonable about this. We're prepared to make it worth your while. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the counter. There's $5,000 in there. Take it. Tell Adrian you got a job offer somewhere else. End things cleanly. For a moment, I just stared at the envelope, then slowly opened it, revealing the thick stack of bills inside. Their eyes followed every movement. And then I started laughing. Quiet at first, then harder, until it filled the room. Veronica's expression darkened. Something funny? I wiped a tear of laughter from my eye, then pulled out my phone. You're offering me $5,000 to walk away? I asked, amused. That's adorable. I opened my banking app and turned the screen so all three of them could see. My checking account balance sat at $847,000. Their faces drained of color. I spent more than that on Adrian's birthday gift, I said lightly. That used bookstore book? It's a first edition, authenticated. I paid $12,000 for it. Diane's hand flew to her mouth. Richard snatched the phone to see for himself. Veronica was frozen, her mouth slightly open. I took my phone back and opened another app, my LinkedIn profile, the real one I'd hidden from their searches. Sloan Whitmore, I read aloud. Founder and former CEO of Catalyst Digital Marketing. Sold the company last year for $8.3 million. Current board member of 3 Fortune 500 companies. Net worth somewhere around $15 million, depending on the market. The silence that followed was priceless. Then I pulled up the folder of screenshots I'd been saving, pictures of Richard's luxury dealerships, Diane's corporate bios, Veronica's law firm profile, and even photos of their real mansion in Meadowbrook, Tesla parked in the driveway. Did you honestly think I didn't know who you were? I asked, my voice sharper now. I figured it out the day after Adrian and I met. I knew this was a setup the second we pulled into this rental house. Richard's eyes widened. How did you know it was a rental? Property records are public, I said coolly. This house is owned by Select Property Management. You started leasing it 6 weeks ago. Right around the time Adrian probably told you he was getting serious with someone. Diane let out a faint gasp. Nice touch with the Hermes scarf, by the way, I added. You almost pulled off the struggling mom act, but not quite. Veronica recovered first, the lawyer in her snapping into place. If you knew we were testing you, she said, why play along? Because I wanted to see how far you'd take it, I replied evenly. And now I know. You didn't just test me, you tried to buy me off. I pulled out my phone again and snapped a photo of the cash-stuffed envelope on the counter. By the way, I said calmly, offering someone money to end a relationship could technically be considered coercion. Not that I need to press charges, I don't need your money. I just want Adrian to know the truth. Right on cue, Adrian walked into the kitchen. He froze when he saw the cash on the counter, the shocked faces, and mine, calm and cold. What's going on? He asked slowly. I turned toward him. Your family just offered me $5,000 to break up with you because they think I'm a gold digger. The color drained from his face. What? He said, turning toward his parents. Diane tried to stammer an excuse, but I cut her off. They've been testing me, Adrian. This whole setup, the house, the furniture, the poor family routine, all of it. They wanted to see if I'd stay with you if you were broke. When I passed that test, they decided I wasn't good enough and tried to pay me off. I showed him my phone with my bank app still open. For the record, I earn more in monthly interest than what they offered me to leave. Adrian blinked, trying to process. You're rich? I nodded. I sold my company last year. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to get to know me, not my money. I gestured to his family. Funny thing is, they had the same idea, just with a payoff at the end. Adrian, we were only trying to protect you, Richard began, but Adrian held up a hand, his voice trembling with anger. You pretended to be poor, he said slowly, rented a house, filled it with fake furniture, and lied to my girlfriend to test her? Mitchell appeared in the doorway, drawn by the noise. And when she passed your test, Adrian continued, you tried to pay her off because you decided she was too poor for me? Veronica tried to interject. We were thinking about your future. My future? Adrian snapped. You mean like Dad marrying you when you were fresh out of law school and broke? Should Grandpa have paid you to leave? Veronica's face turned scarlet. He turned to Diane next. Didn't Grandma try to break you and Dad up because he was just a car salesman? You told me that story. You eloped because she couldn't see past his bank balance. And now you've become her. Tears welled in Diane's eyes, real ones this time. Adrian took my hand. We're leaving, he said quietly. Richard called after him, son, please. We made a mistake. We were only trying to protect you. Adrian stopped and turned. Then trust me to make my own choices, he said firmly. Sloane could have humiliated all of you the moment she realized what you were doing. Instead, she let you show who you really are. He squeezed my hand, and we walked out. Down the street, my real car waited, a Mercedes G-Wagon. Adrian stared at it, stunned. This is yours? I nodded. One of them. We drove in silence for a few minutes before he spoke. I'm so sorry. I didn't know they were planning any of that. I know, I said softly. If I thought you were in on it, I would have walked away that first night. He hesitated. Why didn't you tell me about your money? I pulled into a quiet parking lot and turned to face him. For the same reason your family hid theirs. I wanted to know if you loved me, not what I could offer. I've dated enough people who cared more about my balance sheet than my heart. Adrian nodded slowly. I get that. But, you could have told me once you knew I wasn't like that. I was going to, I said with a small smile. Actually, this weekend. I was going to show you my real place, the penthouse. Your family just accelerated the timeline. He ran a hand through his hair and laughed weakly. My family really is insane. They faked being poor to test you. It's a creative approach, I said, chuckling. Most families just stalk social media. Where are we going now? He asked. To my place downtown, I said. You have a penthouse? And a beach house, I admitted. The apartment you've been to is real, it's just not the whole picture. When we arrived, he was silent in the elevator. The doors opened to reveal floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. This is yours, he breathed. Bought it 3 years ago, I said, slipping off my shoes. Thought it would be an investment, but I ended up falling in love with the light. He looked around in awe. Is this weird for you, me finding out like this? Not weird, I said softly. Just not how I pictured it. I wanted to tell you on my terms, not because your family forced it. We sat together on the couch, and I showed him photos, the sale of my company, old board meetings, news articles. He smiled faintly. You're kind of famous. Which is why I kept things low-key, I said. I wanted to take a break from being Sloane Whitmore, CEO, and just be Sloane. He set my phone down and took my hands. I love you, he said simply. the broke freelancer and the secret millionaire. I just wish my family hadn't ruined how I found out. I smiled. They didn't ruin it. If anything, they did me a favor. I got to see exactly where you stand, and you stood by me without knowing I had $1 to my name. He pulled me close. They'll call, he warned. They'll want to apologize. I'm sure they will, I said calmly. And if they really want to make it right, they'll start by figuring out why they thought testing me was acceptable in the first place. Over the following days, Adrian's phone barely stopped buzzing. His family called, texted, and emailed nonstop, all trying to explain, to apologize, to justify. At first, he ignored them. But eventually curiosity got the better of us both, and he began reading the messages out loud. Diane sent a long, emotional text, admitting she'd let her fear turn her into someone she didn't recognize. She wrote about how much she'd worried about him being hurt again, and how that anxiety had made her cruel. Richard's message was shorter but surprisingly humble. We crossed a line. We thought we were protecting you. We were wrong. Please give us a chance to fix it. Veronica's apology shocked me most. She wrote that watching Adrian defend me reminded her of how their father had once defended Diane from their grandmother's judgment, and realizing that they had become the very kind of people they used to despise was a painful wake-up call. Mitchell's text made us both laugh. Your girlfriend's a badass. Sorry we suck. A week later, Adrian agreed to meet with his parents. He told me he wanted to go alone. He was gone for hours. When he finally returned to the penthouse, he looked drained but lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. They're starting family therapy, he said, collapsing onto the couch. All of them. Together. I raised my brows. Wow. That's unexpected. He nodded. They admitted the money made them paranoid. They stopped seeing people as people, just as potential threats or users. Mom said something that stuck with me. When you're rich, you start wondering if anyone would still love you if you had nothing. That's why they built that fake scenario, to see if you'd stay. And when I did, I said softly, they couldn't make sense of it. Exactly, he said. Their logic was broken from the start. If you were really after money, you'd have researched them and pretended not to care about wealth. They designed a test only amateurs would fail. That actually made him laugh, a real, unguarded laugh for the first time since the confrontation. You kind of did research them, though, he teased. I grinned. Yeah, but I did it to understand who I was dealing with, not to manipulate them. A couple of weeks later, Diane reached out directly. She wanted to meet, just the two of us. I hesitated, but curiosity won. We met at a quiet cafe downtown. She looked completely different this time, no pretense, no frumpy disguise. Elegant, polished, but subdued. Thank you for coming, she began nervously. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me. I was curious what you had to say, I replied. Diane took a deep breath. I'm not here to defend what we did. It was manipulative, and it hurt you, and Adrian. I can't excuse it. We've dealt with so many people over the years who've tried to get close to us for money that we stopped trusting anyone. It turned us bitter. I listened quietly. She continued, therapy's helping us see it for what it was, fear. Deep down, I was terrified that Adrian would end up with someone who'd use him. Instead, I turned into the kind of person who hurts others trying to prevent pain. I nodded. I appreciate the honesty. She hesitated, then asked, if you really had been broke, struggling for real, would you still be sitting here accepting my apology? That caught her off guard. She thought for a long moment before answering. I'd like to say yes, she said finally, but honestly. I don't know. I've realized I've been measuring people's worth by their bank accounts for years, without even realizing it. My mother-in-law used to do that to me, and I swore I'd never become her. But I did, just with more money to hide behind. There were tears in her eyes when she said it. I'm willing to start over, I told her gently. But I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not. I worked hard for what I have, and I won't apologize for it. Diane nodded. I understand. We ended up talking for over an hour. For the first time, I felt like I was meeting the real Diane, not the performance, not the cautious socialite, but the woman beneath all that. She told me stories about when she and Richard were first married, when money was tight and dreams were big. We used to eat ramen 3 nights a week, she said with a wistful smile. I wore the same 3 work outfits for 2 years. But we were happy. We were building something together. Then her tone shifted. When the money came, everything changed. People started showing up with hands out, family, old friends, even strangers. We got tired of feeling used. And somehow, that fear made us exactly what we feared most: distrustful, judgmental, and small. I nodded slowly. That's understandable. But testing people isn't the solution. Therapy, boundaries, and self-awareness are. Diane smiled faintly. That's what we're learning. Over the next few months, the tension slowly eased. Adrian's family invited us to dinner, at their real house this time. It was hard not to laugh at the difference. Massive rooms, designer furniture, priceless art, the polar opposite of that humble rental. They were awkward at first but genuinely trying. Veronica pulled me aside after dinner and admitted she'd been the one pushing hardest for the test. I think I was projecting, she said honestly. I married my ex for financial security. When it fell apart, I started resenting anyone who cared about money, but I was the one who had turned relationships into transactions. Mitchell was just as reflective. Watching that whole thing play out made me realize I was heading down the same road, he confessed. I was starting to assume everyone had hidden motives. Seeing how wrong we were about you changed that. Later, Richard caught me as I was helping clear the table. Adrian told us about your company, he said, his tone sincere. What you built, it's impressive. I wish we'd taken the time to actually know you. We would have been proud of Adrian for dating someone so accomplished, not suspicious. I appreciate that, I said simply. And I'm willing to move forward, but I won't pretend it didn't happen. That test showed me who you all are under pressure. That's not something you forget easily. He nodded. Fair enough. I'll earn your trust back. And to their credit, they did try. Family dinners became comfortable again. They started including me in family group chats and decisions. Diane even invited me to her book club, and to my surprise, it wasn't just a gossip circle, these women actually read the books. 6 months after the infamous birthday incident, Adrian and I were having dinner at the penthouse when he got that thoughtful look he always got before saying something big. I've been thinking about the future, he said. Our future. I set my fork down, giving him my full attention. He continued, watching everything that happened with my family made me realize how much I value what we have. You could have destroyed them. You had every right. But you didn't. You gave them space to learn. I did it for you, I said softly. They're your family. I didn't want to be the reason you lost them. He took my hand across the table. I know we're still young, and it's probably too soon to say this, but I need you to know that I want to spend my life with you. I'm not proposing, not yet, but that's where my heart is. I smiled, my chest warm. That's exactly how I feel. I paused, then added, your family's test, as twisted as it was, ended up being a blessing. I saw the real you through it. You defended me without hesitation. That told me everything I needed to know. We talked late into the night about the life we wanted to build, separate ambitions, shared goals, the kind of partnership built on trust and equality rather than appearances. A year and a half after the whole test fiasco, Adrian proposed. It happened at my beach house in Malibu, just before sunset. There were no photographers, no grand gestures, just the two of us, the sound of the waves, and a ring he'd designed himself. It was simple, elegant, and absolutely perfect. When we shared the news with his family, their reactions were genuinely joyful. Diane cried, the good kind of tears this time, while Richard hugged me and said, "Welcome to the family, officially." Veronica joked that I was stuck with them now, and Mitchell immediately asked if he could bring a date to the wedding. To my surprise, the wedding planning went smoothly. Diane offered to help but made sure I knew she wouldn't take over. I actually appreciated her advice, she had an impeccable eye for detail. We spent afternoons tasting cakes and comparing flowers, and during one of those days, she said something that stayed with me. "I'm grateful you gave us another chance," she said quietly, setting down a sample plate. "Most people wouldn't have." I smiled. "Everyone deserves the opportunity to grow." "I didn't agree with what you did, but I understand why you did it. You acted out of fear, not malice. That doesn't excuse it, but it explains it." She squeezed my hand and said, "You're going to be a wonderful addition to this family." The wedding itself was beautiful, held at a vineyard that balanced intimacy with understated luxury. Both our families attended, and it was oddly heartwarming watching them mingle. My parents, who were comfortably middle class but nowhere near the Worthingtons' wealth, got along effortlessly with them. During the reception, Richard stood to give a speech that had nearly everyone wiping away tears. "I almost lost my son," he began, voice unsteady, because I was too focused on protecting him. "Sloane reminded us all what grace looks like, what forgiveness can do. She could have held our mistakes over us forever, but she didn't. She saw flawed people trying to do better, and she gave us that chance." When he finished, even Veronica was crying. Adrian's speech came next. It was shorter, but it hit like a punch to the heart. "The best thing that ever happened to me," he said, "was meeting someone who saw past my last name and my bank account, to me. And the wildest part? She had more money than I did the entire time and never said a word." Everyone laughed through their tears. "Sloane taught me that real love isn't about what you have," he continued. "It's about who you are and how you show up for each other." That line stayed with me long after the wedding. Now, 2 years into marriage, Adrian and I have found our rhythm. His business is thriving, my latest venture is growing faster than I expected. We divide our time between the penthouse and the beach house, both of which now feel like true homes. As for his family, they've changed more than I ever imagined possible. Diane volunteers weekly at a women's shelter, helping survivors rebuild their lives. Richard started a scholarship fund for first-generation college students. Veronica began doing pro bono legal work for families caught in predatory lending traps. And Mitchell, the youngest, is studying social work, determined to make a difference instead of chasing money. They still have their privileged quirks, of course, but they're self-aware now. They talk openly about the lessons they learned, about how fear and wealth can twist good intentions into cruelty if left unchecked. Sometimes, when Adrian and I sit on the balcony watching the sunset, I think back to that first dinner, the peeling paint, the fake middle-class furniture, the feeling of being judged. Back then, I was angry, humiliated, ready to burn bridges. But now I see that moment differently. That night revealed everyone's true colors, Adrian's loyalty, his family's flaws, and my own capacity for restraint and forgiveness. In the end, the money never mattered. What mattered was finding someone who valued me for who I am, not for what I own, and building a life built on trust, respect, and love that doesn't waver under pressure. Everything else, the tests, the lies, the judgments, was just noise. If you've made it this far, thanks for reading. If you enjoyed the story, leave a comment, drop a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more.